ongoing coronavirus pandemic has triggered an alarming wave of domestic violence across the globe. Reports suggest lockdowns due to COVID across the world have locked up victims of domestic violence with their abusers. The lack of income during the pandemic and the looming threat of hunger have added to the problem. Women who are financially dependent on their husbands suffer even more. And pandemic has exacerbated and made the matters worse. This upsurge in domestic violence against women is so bad that it prompted UN Chief Antonio Guterres to make a frantic appeal to put women's safety first while responding to the pandemic. On 5th April 2020, he warned of horrifying global surge in domestic violence and urged governments across the countries in the globe and the world to increase efforts to prevent violence against women during the coronavirus crisis, while saying this.
But violence is not confined to the battlefield. For many women and girls, the threat looms largest where they should be safest, in their own homes. And so I make a new appeal today for peace at home and in homes around the world. We know lockdowns and quarantines are essential to suppressing COVID-19, but they can trap women with abusive partners. Over the past weeks, as economic and social pressures and fear have grown, we have seen a horrifying global surge in domestic violence. In some countries, the number of women calling support services has doubled. Meanwhile, healthcare providers and police are overwhelmed and understaffed. Local support groups are paralyzed or short of funds. Some domestic violence shelters are closed, others are full. I urge all governments to make the prevention and redress of violence against women a key part of their national response plans for COVID-19.
As per reports, during coronavirus lockdown, emergency services across Europe have seen a sharp rise in domestic abuse calls as per the World Health Organization's regional office in Europe. WHO's regional director for Europe, Hans Klug, said countries are reporting up to 60% increase in emergency calls by women subjected to violence by their intimate partners in April this year compared to last. Officer for Technical Gender and Health at WHO Europe Center, Isabel Yordi said, "We have an increase in reporting from almost all countries." The UN Agency for Sexual and Reproductive Health, UNFPA, has also estimated that there would be 31 million more cases of domestic violence worldwide if lockdowns continue for another 6 months. As per the media reports, women's rights advocates say that Mexico has a bad track record with gender-based violence and the outbreak is only making things worse. The National Network of Women Shelters has already witnessed a 60% increase in calls for help. They say this is deteriorating an already chronic problem. France's Interior Minister Christophe Castaner has said that reports of domestic violence across the country have jumped by more than 30% since the country went into lockdown on March 17th. She revealed that in Paris alone, cases were up by 36%. Reports say France already has one of the highest rates of domestic violence in Europe. Every year, an estimated 219,000 women aged between 18 to 75 face physical or sexual violence by current or former partners, but only 20% of them report it. To curb the domestic violence during the pandemic, France has announced to pay for hotel rooms for victims of domestic violence and open pop-up counseling centers after figures of abusive cases spiked during lockdown. Gender Equality Minister Marlene Schiappa said about 20 centers would open in stores around the country so women could drop in for help while getting groceries. The minister had earlier warned that the lockdown would create a breeding ground for violence. As per newly introduced rules, women can go to the pharmacy and request a Mask 19, a code word that will alert the pharmacist to contact the authorities in cases of domestic violence. In the first 2 weeks of the lockdown, authorities in Spain received 18% more calls than in the same period the previous month. In Spain, the Institute for Equality has launched a campaign called Mascarilla 19, Mask 19 to help victims of domestic violence and abuse. Pharmacies are widespread. Kika Fimoro, who came up with the idea to help victims, said when a woman experiences violence at homes or sexual assault, she can go to the nearest pharmacy and request for Mask 19, the mask that will save her life. Pharmacy staff take a woman's name, address and phone number and alert the emergency services. And like this, the police and the help reaches her. Many countries like Spain, Germany, Argentina, Italy, Norway and France have launched campaign Mask 19, also known as the code word scheme. In Denmark, calls for emergency accommodation almost doubled in the weeks after the government announced lockdown. In Belgium also, a threefold increase in calls in the listening services of the Collective Against Family Violence and Exclusion has been reported. Wang Fei, founder of an anti-domestic violence non-profit in the central Huai province of China, has said reports of domestic violence have nearly doubled since cities were put under lockdown. He added that cases have increased 3 times more than earlier figures in the same month the previous year. He also said the epidemic has had a huge impact on domestic violence, and according to our statistics, 90% of the causes of violence are related to COVID-19 epidemic. One believes that fear and anxiety from the extended quarantine as well as the economic strain put on many families may have contributed to the spike. Where does India stand in this scary landscape? India is also not an exception to the trend of increase in domestic violence. In the first 3 weeks of the nationwide lockdown, data of the National Commission for Women NCW indicated an upsurge in the number of domestic violence cases between March 23rd and April 16. As per reports, NCW registered 587 complaints related to domestic violence against women. This was an increase from 396 complaints received in the past 25 days between February 27 and March 22nd. Most of the cases were reported from states like UP, Bihar, Haryana and Punjab. In an interim report published by NALSA, led by the judge of the Supreme Court, Justice N.V. Ramana, domestic violence cases have increased during the lockdown period in India. As per the data, a total of 727 cases relating to domestic violence were reported in different states and union territories across the country for seeking legal aid and assistance. The highest number of cases were reported in the state of Uttarakhand, 144, followed by Haryana 79, Delhi 63, Chandigarh 50, Tamil Nadu 48, Punjab and Uttar Pradesh 47 each, West Bengal 46, Odisha reported 37 cases, Chhattisgarh reported 31 cases, Bihar reported 21 cases, while Kerala has reported 18 cases. As per media reports, during the first 4 phases of the coronavirus lockdown in India, women have filed more domestic violence complaints than the recorded cases in similar period in the last 10 years. But sadly, even this alarmingly enormous explosion of cases is just a tip of an iceberg, as 86% of women who undergo domestic violence do not seek help in the country. The reports also suggest that in 2020, between March 25 and May 31st, women lodged 1477 complaints of domestic violence. Such alarming rise in the domestic violence cases have been the biggest jump in the last decade.